Hey everyone, welcome to yet another Teach Kelvin Your Thing session. For today's session, I have Erik who's going to be teaching me how to build full stack apps with AWS Amplify. How you doing, Erik?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's glad to be on. Finally was able to connect with you and get this going. So always interested to teach people a little bit more
Mhm.
about Amplify and its set of tools.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited we are able to do this finally because we've been back and forth on trying to get the right timing, but we finally did it. So before we get into AWS Amplify and everything, I need you to introduce yourself. So you tell us who you are, what you do, what you've been doing. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I'm Erik. My name's Erik Hanchett. I'm a full stack software developer at AWS Amplify or at AWS. So a little history. I was a front end engineer on the Amplify team working on basically our UI components library for a couple of years. And just recently, I moved over to the developer advocate role. So now I am connecting with people like you and others and teaching people about AWS Amplify. So just for those who don't know, AWS Amplify is like a set of tools and libraries that make it easier for full stack developers or basically web developers to create full stack applications. So it has tools that help you host your applications. It has like a JavaScript library. It also has mobile libraries for Flutter, iOS, and Android. And it has a whole UI component library too. And then today, something I want to show a little bit off of is Studio, which is a tool, like a visual tool to create your backend infrastructure as well. And another little thing about me, I've been a software developer for over 10 years. I've done a lot of stuff in the back end. I used to be a Java developer for several years, and then I moved to the front end. And then I've worked quite extensively in Vue.js. I'm a big fan of it. And then I recently have been doing a lot of my last job. I did a lot of Angular, and then recently a lot of React as I was in my last job. So as I was started joining AWS, that is.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Erik. So for those who don't know, Erik also have an amazing YouTube channel where he teaches a lot about Vue. So yeah, thank you for everything you do for the Vue ecosystem. I'm a Vue nerd, and yeah, so I think we should get into talking about AWS Amplify because I really do not have the best of ideas or what it is and why I would need it. So could you just elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah, and by the way, I definitely, like I said, a huge fan of you. So check out my YouTube channel. I'm also posting stuff on Amplify and React and Angular too on that channel as well. It's just kind of a fun way to teach. Yeah, so Amplify, like I said, is a set of tools that help front end developers create full stack apps. So it's kind of like multi-headed. There's this meme, maybe I can post somewhere that shows it has quite a few areas. The Amplify hosting is a way to host your apps. We also are very related to AppSync, which is our managed GraphQL service. So you can put all your data inside there. We also have a CLI, which is a command line interface, command line utility that you can use to create your applications, and it also provisions your backend, so you can have it provision your Cognito or your authentication and authorization services. You can add Lambda functions or serverless functions. You can also add storage. So we just recently created a storage manager, which is like a file uploader, which makes it easier to upload files to S3. And then we have libraries that make it easier. So if you aren't interested in the provisioning part, you can use our UI libraries to connect to AWS services. Like, for example, if you needed to create your own login page, you can use our library to create a login page that works into Cognito. Or if you need to talk to S3, you can use it to connect to S3. We also do in-app messaging. So if you need to add in-app messaging, you would use one of our libraries to do that. We have PubSub, and we have a whole bunch of things that those libraries do. Then we have a components library, and this is something that I'm really I know very well because I worked on the team for a couple of years on this, and it's a React component library that has all the primitives you would expect from a component library, like buttons and drop downs and menus and texts and things like that. And so it's a pretty well done. It's a very useful component library. We also use something called design tokens to help put it together. And that also has a couple of really cool features called connected components. And connected components are like components that have minimal boilerplate that you can just drag and drop, not drag and drop, but you can just, with a few lines of code, you can put into your React application. And actually, it works for Vue and Angular. We do have a few connected components for those two and React Native that you can just put into your application and then add things like I mentioned earlier, like a file uploader. We call it a storage manager. We also have one for Geo, which is a way to like add maps to your application. We have one for Authenticator. Yeah, so we have quite a few offerings in the kind of this Amplify ecosystem,
Mhm.
which is really fun to teach people about. And then
Mm.
lastly, I guess Studio, not last but not least, of course, is Studio, which has a lot of really neat features to visually create your backend. So you can add your authentication, you can add in essentially everything you need to create your backend. You can add like uh, you can add your app sync, you can do relationships kind of in this visual way. And then it even has this feature called Figma Decode, which you can go into Figma Studio. So if you're a Figma user, this is perfect. You can create all your components that you want, and then you can export them into Amplify, and that will generate the components using the component library I just talked about. So it's almost like a low code, sort of no code solution in some ways to create your components and then have them be inside Amplify. I know that was a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think the key takeaway for me is Amplify is an ecosystem of tools that lets you build web applications, giving you different offerings from component library to a studio for doing no code, low code backend, and also Figma as code, right? So it definitely sounds good. So I feel everything still looks a little bit or sound a little bit abstract. So I think we should
Yeah.
just dive into it and let me see Amplify in action and all these tools in the ecosystem. You ready for that?
Yeah, I can show some of them off.
Okay,
Absolutely.
sure.
And just to also iterate too is that these tools are really meant for up to production. So these are hardened tools. People with thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers are using them. So it's not like this is some kind of beta tool or tool for only for startups. This is kind of from startups all the way to enterprise level companies use these tools to help create their applications.
Oh, that's amazing. So yeah, let's
Mhm.
see how we get started with Amplify.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So you guys see my screen? All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the way I like to start with is, of course, we have to kind of talk about the why. This is kind of how I always start when I work with customers and when we start new applications. It's just to make sure that we're using the right tools for the right job. And so I like to always show people this UI docs site. This is our document site for Amplify, and this is the US UI site for components. So this is something I kind of want to show off today. So if you have an application and you need to quickly add a component library to it, you need to connect to AWS services, like this is what you want to use. And luckily we have it for Angular, Flutter, React, React Native, and Vue. And so this is the way to get started. Today, I'm going to show things in React because React does have a few more features than Vue and Angular today. So we have the full component library that I was talking about before. So you can add like dividers, headings, and icons and images. And then it also has connected components. So I thought maybe today what I could start off with is, and you can see Vue, it has the authenticator, but doesn't have all those connected components. So I thought maybe I could just start off with showing how you would get the UI component library up and running. So I have VS Code open here. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a new app. So I'm going to do, yeah, let's do npm init vite latest. And we'll just create a new app here. Now, of course, this works with Next and Nuxt and all that, but we'll just use this. We'll call it, I don't know, Kelvin Livestream. Or I guess we're not exactly live, but a stream.
Yeah.
We'll do React. I'll use TypeScript. And then in here, we'll do a few installs. We'll do add AWS Amplify and AWS Amplify UI React. And this will get the two libraries that we need installed for this demo today. And in the same time, what we could do is we have this AWS management console. So you can sign up for AWS. They have a pretty generous free tier that you can essentially create an account for free and then get many of the services for hundreds and hundreds of hours for free. One thing to realize too is, especially with AWS Amplify, most of the services that you use are serverless. You only get charged for the hours or minutes that you're using, and they're really, really inexpensive. So keep that in mind when you're using it, that you don't have to really too much worry about that stuff. So if you come in here and I can put Amplify, you can see your AWS Amplify here. Let's just take a look at AWS Amplify while this is installing. And you could see this is kind of the starting page that you'll see on the front page here. We can just click get started. And it gives us a couple of different options. If we want to host our app, we can go to this Amplify hosting here. If we want to do Studio, which I'll show you today. So we'll do get started. And we'll create a new app. I'll call it Open. And this will basically create our Studio application that we can then interact with our app here. Okay, so we have this running. I'm going to go and change directories to it. Livestream Kelvin. Livestream Kelvin Livestream. And there's a couple of things we have to do to just get everything working the way we want to here. Is if we go back to our React, there's a getting started guide, and then there's troubleshooting, and then there's Vite. So you have to add a couple of extra options in to get Vite working. Not too bad. So we just need to open the Vite config file, and then I'll just copy. Well, first we'll go into the index file, and don't worry about my ESLint error. Here to the bottom, we'll add the script tag, and then also we need to add in this resolve. So I'm going to go into the Vite config, and I'm just going to copy and paste it in there. And this just adds in a runtime config that just helps with the building of it. And then you don't really need this, but I like to add it in case you have certain options. And we can do skip live check. It's already true, so we don't have to change it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the directory. And if we did this right, it should start up. And we haven't really done anything yet. Okay, so here's our Vite app. We haven't really changed anything. And we'll go into our, I think we're going to start with our app tsx file. And we'll just delete all this stuff that it comes with. Let's see here. delete up to here. And then we'll delete this, delete this. We don't need this use state. We don't need this. And okay, okay, this is good. So now let's see if we can get a hello world showing. Oh, now it's a little reactism there. Okay, we got a hello world. Let me look at the CSS. I think we have a few things I want to delete in here. I think the main TSX file has a CS import. Yeah, so we'll just change this. I don't like the defaults. I'm just going to delete all this. This is kind of like, I think we can leave the rest there. Okay, so now we have a hello world centered in the middle. Great. Now, if we want to use, if we kind of go back to our application here, we want to add in our UI components. You can see here, you can add this new style sheet. So I'm going to go into the main TSX file. I'm going to add this style sheet for UI React styles.css. And we should now be able to use some of them. So let's see if this will work. So I'm going to go back to my app TSX. Instead of having this H1 here, I'm going to import in from, let's see here, from AWS Amplify UI React. Let's see if we can add in, I think it's called heading. Heading. And then here I'm going to put in a level. See here we have TypeScript, so it's auto-completing for us, which is great. And we'll put 3 in here. And then also add in a button. Hello, press me. And I'll import that in from UI React as well. So if we did this all right, cool. So we can see we already have our hello world, our press me button here. One thing too, we can do is this div, we can change it to a view. This is another one of the React primitives that we have. And then when we have React primitives, we can actually add attributes in here. So now we have style props that we can add in that do certain things. So I think one of them is padding. Let's see here. Let's add in, I don't know, rem1. Added a little padding to the side. You can also add, with this button, I think we have a variation. And from this variation, we can add in, I don't know, primary. That makes, oh, I think our primary color is already that, but I wonder if we can do, oh, it's still saving. There we go. So now our primary, we have this nice primary color to it. So you can see our component library is working. We have a whole bunch of components that we can use. They're listed here. Does that make sense, Kelvin, so far?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's feeling like styled components, like stuff from Chakra UI and stuff. So it does feel familiar.
Yeah, yeah. And one nice thing about using these like style props is you can we can add a whole theming system. So another way we can handle it here is so we can import in, I think it's the theme provider from UI React. And then what you do is you surround your whole app by it. And then inside this theme provider, it can actually access a theme. So we can add a theme to it. So let's say here, I got a lot of stuff open. I'll create a new file called theme.ts. Yes. And then here, if you look at our documentation, I'm going to do this live, so I'm probably going to make a few mistakes, but we'll kind of troubleshoot together.
Mhm.
If I go to theme provider, you can see here, you can add this theme provider and you can kind of change the look and feel of things. And to create a theme, it sort of looks like this. So you can do const theme. So let's see if we can do this. I'm going to create a theme, and it's going to be a type theme. And I'm going to import this in. Since we are type aware, we're going to import in theme from UI React. And right away, we can start saying that we need to add a name in. We're going to call this Kelvin theme. I don't know.
Okay.
And then we can add in tokens. And these tokens help change kind of buttons, things like that. So let's see, if we go tokens, we have a whole bunch of options. We can do components here. Let's see here, we can do our button. And let's see here. All right, so I'm here inside the theme. Let's see if we can change the color here of our app. And let me see if I can make this. Maybe can code at the same time. I'm gonna resize this window. There we go. Okay, so I have right on the left-hand side, I have my hello world, press me, and I have my component here, this theme I've created. So first, I want to connect this theme up. So inside here, I'm going to import in theme. Well, we'll do it this way. We'll do theme. Actually, I have to go in here first. Let's do export const theme. And then in the main TSX file, we'll import theme from theme. And then inside here, the ThemeProvider has a prop called theme. I can just pass theme into it. Now, as we make changes here, it should update the theme. So like this component here, this color is everything in this component and our UI component library is controlled by tokens, design tokens. And so we can make changes throughout our app so every single button kind of looks a different way. So in this case, I have the component buttons here. If we look inside the app file, we do have a button here and it says variation primary. So we should be able to change what primary does. So I'm going to come down here and you can see here, primary is one listed. And now I can choose color here as a value. And let's change it to yellow. Change it. Cool. You can see here on the left-hand side, it updated. Now we have yellow text.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do all sorts of things. Let's say if I want to do font size, I want to default it to a different size. So I don't know, 2rem. So now it's really big. So these themes can really help you brand your website exactly the way you want it. And I think this is a little bit different than maybe some of the other component libraries you saw. You can also take these you can see here I was doing this style props. I can actually reference inside here a style prop instead of the padding here. And I think I'd have to look them up, but I think one's called medium. And then there's large. Not saving. There we go. Yeah, so you can see it went, the padding changed a little bit. Medium. So I think it's changing a little bit based on this. So we definitely have design tokens that you can just add directly into these style props, which is nice. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of some of the features. There's a lot more components that you can use that we won't get into today, but let's take a look at more of the full stack part of it. We'll head back to our console. And so we created our app here. Let's click Launch Studio. Now I might have timed out, but let's see here. I can get in. I know I'm going pretty quick, but does this, do
Mm-hmm.
you have any questions?
No, everything does make sense. Yeah.
All right, so here is our studio. And now we can connect the studio up to our app here. But first, let's add authentication in. So I'm gonna click authentication. What this is telling me, we can start from scratch or we can reuse an existing Amazon Cognito resource. But since we're brand new, let's just use it from scratch. We can set this up so you, when users sign in, they can use their email address. We'll just let that defaulting. We can add other login mechanisms. So if you wanted someone to like do by phone or
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, Google, we have federated access that you can set up for Facebook, Google, Amazon, sign in with Apple. We can do MFA too if you want to do multi-factor authentication. But I think I'm just going to leave it at the defaults. I can even add extra attributes. I'm going to click deploy here. And this will go ahead and deploy our AWS backend, and this will take a few minutes. So while it's doing this, we can kind of poke around the documentation. So this site right here is mostly for the UI components. Now, one nice thing too is once we have this authentication backend set up, we can use some of those connected components that I was talking about earlier, like the authenticator. This is a way to add authentication flows to your application with minimal boilerplate. So you have ways to sign in and create accounts. And we'll see if we can get that all working. And this will actually, once we get this up and running, we can create a user and we should see the user inside our studio, which will be great. And we've already done a lot of this already. We installed at the beginning of this video, we installed the CLI, or actually we haven't done this yet. So maybe we can do this real quickly.
Okay.
So here's our app. Now if your first time ever using AWS and you haven't installed the CLI, you would need to do that. So you do npm install at AWS dash amplify slash CLI at latest. And this would make sure you have it installed on the command line. And you'll need to have this for Studio. And then you'll need to install these dependencies. Now we did this already. So if we look inside our package JSON, I am clicking around too fast. And we go to our package JSON and we look at our dependencies. We have AWS Amplify and AWS Amplify UI React. And these are the two ones that you'll need. And then the next step is add the authenticator. And also we'll make sure we install the styles. And we did install the styles. If we go to the main TSX file, you can make sure you install these styles right here. So those are kind of three things that we need. All right, so we have the CLI installed, which is good. And it's going to come, still taking a few more minutes to get this Cognito. And you can actually look at the deploy logs.
Mm-hmm.
What this essentially does, it's like it's provisioning everything in the back end. It's creating these CloudFormation scripts is the way that we handle provisioning. And it's doing everything in the background for us. I can give a tour of some more of the documentation while we're kind of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So if we click on docs up here, it's docs.amplify.aws. This is our main documentation site, which we are right now doing a lot of updates to. So I think some of these things might change if people are watching watching this again in the future. But it has a good starting guide, so you can see all the different frameworks: JavaScript, React, React Native, and the mobile ones. And you can just click on your one, you can click on whatever framework or library you're using, and then you can follow this guide. Well, here's the library breakdown. So for one of the main ways you can use our set of tools is just use our JavaScript library. What we're doing today with Studio, you don't have to necessarily use, you can just use the library. And here's all the different things it can do. It could do analytics, geo, in-app messaging, interactions, predictions, pub sub storage. So it has quite a bit of capabilities. And this would just be like, let's say you already created some of these services in your AWS backend, and now you need to interact with it on the front end. You would use this. All right, looks like it's done. So there's a view Amplify CLI instructions. If you haven't already done this, this is how you install the CLI. We just did that. And now we can just copy this code here. And I'm going to paste it. What this will do is it will pull down the infrastructure that we just created. It might make it, yeah, it might make us log in if we're not already logged in. And if you've never run this before, it might ask you some information to create your Amplify, or it might ask you some information to create your AWS account if you haven't done that. In this
Okay.
case, we have. All right, so we're using VS Code, JavaScript. We're in React. I just hit enter all through all these.
Okay.
This will pull it all down. Do you plan on modifying the backend? Always do yes. And now it's fetching all the data from the cloud. And great, so no errors, that's good. We got all check marks. And then if you look here, let's close a few of these. I kind of have this blown up, so it's a little harder to see. But so now what it did is it created this new Amplify folder. If you create a new VDAP, this obviously it's not going to be there. And this has all our configurations and provisioning and CloudFormation scripts, which is the way the backend interprets, basically the way AWS interprets the way it can provision the backend. It's all inside here. And it also, more importantly, I'm not going to show this on camera, but it creates an AWS exports file right here. And this exports file is your configuration file, which will have all the information for the back end. And it'll have what you need for the authenticator, or the authentication that we just created. So let's see if we can get the authenticator working and we can actually log in. I'm going to go back to my app TSX. I guess the point being is we want to see if we can, if we go back to here and we'll go back. All right, let's see if we can add that authentication back into our app, or into our application here, so someone could log in. So I can say, actually, first I'm gonna go to main TSX, and I'm gonna import in. Now this AWS export file has all our credentials in it, so we're going to configure that. So I'm gonna import AWS export, actually, I believe AWS exports from, and now it's not showing up probably because it's coming up as a JS file. So I'm going to do in my TS config, allow JS is false. I'm going to put true here.
Okay.
I have a little tip if anybody ever has that problem. And cool, now it's showing up here, AWS exports. And now I need to make sure that it works. So I'm going to import in, and we'll see what that squiggly line is. We'll import in, let's see here, from AWS Amplify. That's that JavaScript library we already installed. And we'll do
Mhm.
Amplify configure, and then we'll pass AWS exports. And now, anytime we use Amplify or AWS library, everything should be connected together. And we already have the styles here, which make sure we have this installed. Now, let's see if we can add into our app.tsx file an authenticator. So I'm going to import in authenticator from AWS Amplify UI Rack, this one right here. We come back here and look at our really ugly hello world. Well, let's start the server again. npm run dev. I love Beat, how fast it is. And it should show up here. My Windows computer, I usually run this on a Mac, but it's not quite as
Okay.
fast. Okay, so I'm gonna add right here. We'll leave the button there for a second, but we'll add in the authenticator. Cool. It added in this big thing right here. This is the authenticator. And you can see we changed the yellow color. It's changing the yellow color in the sign in too. So now we have a way to create an account and sign in. So I'm gonna just get rid of this. And what I want to do is, as soon as this user signs in, I want to show a message.
Okay.
So we can do that. So I'm going to have this authenticator here, and I'm going to have inside here, I'm going to have some values. Now, just to make this a little quicker, I'm going to copy and paste the boilerplate from here, because it's a little easier than typing this all out. So once a user logs in, I want it to show like this hello user and then a button to sign out. So I'm going to copy and paste it there. And if I did that right, it should work. giving me an error on this user because it's possibly undefined. There we go. And did I miss anything else? Let's see here. I did. Let me do this. I will just copy and paste this whole thing in here. And then I'll come back here and I'll go like this. Okay, so now when a user, so what this is saying is once a user logs in, you will have, it'll show the username, which since we're doing by email, it might be this kind of weird long string, but that's fine.
Mhm.
And then we'll have a sign out button. And then instead of using this button here, we have our button. So I want to use the button from the component library. All right, let's see if this all works. Can I come in here? I'm going to create account. Now I'm going to use an old email address that I have here. Test. And then I'm going to put in some random password. And I'm going to click create account. Cool. So it's asking me to check my email. So on my other screen, I'll check my email, the code. You see, all this is built into this authenticator. I haven't had to do anything. By the way, this is really blown up. Confirm. Cool. So I see hello. This is that username. And then I have a sign out button, which works awesome. So let's click sign out. All right. So I have successfully created an account. I signed in. Anything between the opening and closing brackets of the authenticator is you'll only see if you're logged in. And now if I go back to my AWS Amplify console, which is right here, let's go to user management. Hey, there it is. There's the
Wow. Mm-hmm.
user I just created. You can see account says confirmed. I don't really have much user info on it or anything, but here I can create groups. I can do some housekeeping here if I need to delete this user or
Mhm.
suspend their account, and I can do it all inside the console here. Now,
Nice.
I think that's enough for today, but we do have data. We can add a whole AppSync GraphQL models, and we do have this design. This is what I was talking before with the Figma to code functionality.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So, I think you barely scratched the surface because I could see a whole lot going there in the docs and everything. But this is a good starting point for anyone curious, and for myself who haven't seen AWS Amplify in action. I just did. So, where does one go to like learn more about AWS Amplify for the different services you offer?
Yeah, I would go to the official docs. If you go to, I probably even start with these our docs.amplified at AWS, and then in the top of the screen here, you'll see all these different links. So if you want to learn more about that UI library, that component library, and the connected components, you click here. If you want to learn more about Studio, you can just go to the docs site and click Studio. Also, we have full courses. A lot of people don't realize this because we're like, I wish there was a full course on what you were just teaching, but we have how to build up, we have like real use cases, production level type apps, how to use Amplify with Swift. We have how to use it with Next.js. Kind of this one right here, Fullstack for front-end developers, build your first AWS Amplify React app. This is similar to the demo I just did, but it goes
Mhm.
way more in depth. It uses the Figma to code plugin, which allows you to like create all your components in Figma. So I would also check here. And then of course, you can go to eric.video or eric.video, and this will go directly to my YouTube page. And if you go to videos, I have tons of different videos. If you go to playlists, I have an Amplify playlist. It's somewhere down here in this list of many different playlists. Let's see here. Last video added. View 3 shorts, AWS Amplify. I have a full playlist of different Amplify videos, and just take a look at my channel. I'm always posting stuff on Amplify and different frameworks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. So, anyone want to reach out to you after now, talk about AWS View or anything? Where can they reach out to you from?
I try my Twitter at ErikCH. Yep,
Okay.
just follow me on Twitter. My DMs are open, so always like to talk to people who are using Amplify or working on Amplify. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Erik. I really enjoyed the session.
absolutely, thanks, Kelvin.